Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
How Lithuania, you guys can't see, my bad. How Lithuania is bracing for a brutal Russian invasion as war plans against Putin revealed. Uh-oh. The Sun. Let's go, guys. My name's Connor. If you're new, original link, top description as always. Let's learn. So obviously Lithuania is a crucial point for a potential Russia-NATO conflict with Kaliningrad. I always call it Königsberg. Kaliningrad, I think it was a former name. Kaliningrad and Belarus and the Suwalki Gap would be like a super apparent first strike for Russia or for NATO. And so Lithuania is obviously very crucial for that.
We need a level of paranoia. It's better to be paranoid than occupied. Why would you mine something if you believe that Russians would never attack because Americans are defending? We see that happening somewhere else, right? We know, okay, that has been very clear. But when it happens to you, would you know it, that this has started?
On Vladimir Putin's doorstep, a tiny nation of 2 million people are drawing up war plans for a possible invasion. As Russia's threat multiplies across Europe, Lithuania is on edge. Officials in Lithuania warned that Russia is ramping up GPS jamming operations against the country, with pilots reporting more than 1,000 disruptions in June. It marks a massive increase, with 585 incidents recorded in May and 447 in April. And security chiefs have identified the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, which shares a border with Lithuania, as the source of the interference. But Lithuania's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gabrielius Landsbergis, believes his nation is putting in the correct measures to push back against Putin's forces.
I'm terribly proud that last year we reached 3.5% of GDP towards defense. So for us, it's not an easier thing to do rather than, for UK or France, right? So it's still very difficult to convince your people that you're not going to spend the money on, I don't know, police salaries or teacher salaries or infrastructure, but basically you're going to spend that on German tanks. People have to understand why you're doing this with their money. So we are doing that. Then there are, a slow, a bit too slow for my taste, a push to actually think about the defense lines on the border between Lithuania and Belarus. What I would like to see is, wherever possible, new forests being seeded. That you would plant trees, because we still have a lot of open space which could potentially be used for tanks to roll over. I would like to see an actual defense line being built with mines, ditches, infrastructure such as dragon teeth prepared. So basically we are taking this really seriously.
Dragon teeth being those like multiple concrete, like cone looking, dragon teeth looking things to kind of prevent an easy tank and artillery crossing.
Because it works in two ways. First of all, shows to the enemy that we're serious, right? So we are taking the threat seriously. All the defensive measures cannot be considered escalatory, because it's basically just us building a stronger lock. And it tells our allies that what we are preaching, that what we are asking our allies to do, we're doing first at home. So that is one part. The second part, which then a bit goes outside Lithuania, but I think it's very important to mention that.
Yeah, I think that an alliance like NATO would be more powerful if each individual country within NATO has their own kind of complete army that in theory could put up a fight on its own against a foreign invasion, and every country having that ability, but in NATO, rather than a NATO alliance where everyone relies on certain strategic abilities of other countries that combined are in theory can be very good. But my humble opinion, because I don't know that much about this stuff, I like to learn about it, is that the former would be better if it was a collection of countries who have their own capabilities to fight a war on their own, but don't have to because they're in NATO. Does that make sense?
is Lithuania has an agreement with Germany about the deployment of full combat-ready brigade in Lithuania starting 2027. So we will be seeing 5,000 German troops, in full gear, full equipment, deployed and ready to fight in case there is any sort of a emergency, a military emergency in my country. I would say that this provides a strategic difference for a country being without this contingent and with, because it is a major deterrent. Russians have to take this into consideration that they would be attacking not just Lithuanian troops, but German troops from a get-go. The basic scenario, under pretense of which NATO is preparing for a potential escalation with Russia, is basically something what we have seen used against Ukraine. Big, powerful force assembled on one side of the border, threatening to attack, maybe some cyber events, some hybrid events prior to that, and then invasion starts. So this sort of scenario for NATO, in NATO's minds, allows enough time for NATO to prepare and assemble. Basically.
Question, guys. If anyone here is from watching is from Poland or Lithuania, or anyone who has knowledge of this, what is the relationship between Lithuania and Poland? Is it 100% good vibes? Or are there any kind of quarrels? Obviously, they're both in NATO. I believe they're both in the EU. I often confuse which countries are in one and in the other, or in both, or in neither. And so I'm wondering how friendly the Lithuanian-Polish relations are. If anyone knows that, I'd love to hear it.
You would have 200. NATO's minds allows enough time for NATO to prepare and assemble. Basically, you would have 200,000 Russian troops, but nominally you would probably expect 400,000 NATO troops to be assembled in Lithuania to deter, and in case Russians still are crazy enough to try that, this amount would basically push them out. I've always advocated for having in mind different scenarios, not a Ukrainian one, but specifically tailored to the Baltic states, and which would look something more akin to an extended hybrid event that would not, or would be very difficult for us, for Lithuania or any other Baltic state, to trigger Article 5, because it would be a very difficult scenario to explain to our Western allies that, okay, this is an attack. I was asked in several conferences to elaborate on these scenarios, and one of the scenarios that I've used is a scenario where a train, one that passes through Lithuania almost daily from Moscow to Kaliningrad, is full of Russians, especially now Russians going to Baltic seaside for vacation. Imagine if that sort of a train basically stops for some malfunction, a cyber, technical, whatever, mechanical, inside Lithuania. People start texting, we're in trouble, we need some help, we need assistance, and Putin would say, well, we need to send just a tiny detachment of border control people, of border guards.
Interesting scenario. That makes sense.
Just a tiny detachment of border control people, of border guards, accompanied maybe by the police, in order to assist those in the train. It all escalates in a matter of hours.
I would imagine a reaction to this would be an immediate invasion by NATO forces into Belarus. Since technically that's not Russia, and Belarus is a well-known, super close ally of Russia, of just to make it more difficult, and just to widen that Suwalki gap. Anyone's thoughts on that?
So the train stops in hour 2, T+2, you have a contingent already entering in Lithuania. Then you have a question, should we shoot? Should we basically stop them? What sort of a thing should happen? And then, the Putin would say, well, the police and border guards are in danger. They need to be accompanied by soldiers. And voila, basically you are on a very fast escalation ladder. Now, the point in all this is, so we go to Brussels and we say, look, we are under attack. And I imagine the big group of our allies in the West would say, well, are you really? Maybe you're just overreacting, right?
This is a genius scenario by this guy. I don't know if he brought this up, but this is a scenario that is kind of foreseeable and could, if you explain it to the other EU members, that this could be a possibility. And that if we call for aid through this, especially with the leading up to the war in Ukraine, with Russians having their troops all along the Ukrainian border with Russia, and a lot of people I remember being like, prior to this war, but when there was big news about Russian troop movements along, that even a lot of Ukrainian citizens were like, similar to how South Korean citizens are like with North Priya, of like they always do these exercises to kind of threaten us. But with what happened with Ukraine, with Russian soldiers appearing maybe to just be a threatening military exercise, I'd imagine that this would make more NATO countries be like, no, that you just pulled this with Ukraine. I'm not just like, I am paying very close attention to you and probably moving troops very close to that area of the train tracks.
In the West would say, well, are you really? Maybe you're just overreacting, right? It's a normal civilian rescue situation. Just help Russians with whatever you can. Don't shoot, don't escalate, just take it slow, maintain a cool head. And maybe we are convinced by that. And then next thing you know, basically we lose at least partially the control of all of our territory, or at least part of it. So that is the principle which I'm always advocating. Let's think not about the scenarios which we are accustomed to, which were easier for us to determine and deter that this is actually happening, because Russians will definitely not provide us an easy scenario. So for these hybrid type of scenarios, it is very difficult to prepare, because the first you have to prepare the political class even more so, rather than the military. So that means that the people in Brussels, in Washington, in London, and anywhere else in Warsaw, have to be prepared more than the military.
I think that another good answer, what the hell do I know? Let me know if I'm wrong or you disagree. Would be like, okay, Russia will let you have your troops there, fine, to try and protect the train until it's able to move forward again to Kaliningrad. But we are going to set up a lot of troops on the Lithuanian side of the tracks and the Polish side of the track or the area, and be like, we are not here to attack you. We are just here to make sure that your intentions are to fix the train and keep on moving, right? And so it's a way so that if this is a trick, you have people ready, but to avoid an unnecessary conflagration or what's the word? Provocation. Just like we are ready right here if you pull any moves, but we won't interfere for you trying to fix the train and make it keep going.
It means that we have to be ready to meet Russia's challenge, because if we don't, well, the military might not know what to do in case that happens.
The war is always avoidable.
God damn, his English is good.
But it's up to Russia now and Mr. Putin to decide which path he wants to choose.
Did he spend a long time in the USA? Because that is a flawless English accent.
Russia now and Mr. Putin to decide which path he wants to choose.
I believe that there is a sort of mentality in all this, because the belief in transatlantic deterrence, basically in simple words, it means that Russians would never attack Americans or something that is protected by Americans. That was so overwhelmingly strong that basically you don't need any other plan. And I will always say, okay, fine, I still have believed that Americans have an interest in safe and secure Europe as well as Baltics, right? But what if, for example, there's an additional conflict in Indo-Pacific? What if China decides to attack Taiwan at the same time to divide the attention, and Americans are just unable to be with us at the time of need? And for example, or they would be delayed 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. What would be left of our country if we're just depending on a single point that Americans are here to defend us? I'm not even going to considering that they are changing their posture to a point where they are changing whether they would defend Europe, because at least during the NATO summit that has been denied and then confirmed that Americans are going to continue defending Europe. So I think that this is the main issue. We need to tackle this and start thinking about these what if scenarios, which are not necessarily very well planned at this stage, and might be very dangerous to us in NATO.
I think that was an amazing what if scenario, by the way. I think that was a perfect what if scenario. As a way for Russia to have plausible deniability before launching an attack. And of course, a Russia attack against Ukraine is one thing. A Russian attack against NATO is another thing, where there's obviously a very possible nuclear exchange. And so Russia would have to be pretty sure that, if we do this, they wouldn't dare launch, nuclear attacks or anything like that, which I doubt they would. I'm sure at first it would be non-nuclear, more conventional warfare against Russia. But if you're Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania, that's not enough to calm you down, because of how, you have to think about every scenario, no matter how unlikely it could be, where NATO is just like, all right, instead of an all-out nuclear war, you just get Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. I don't think that would happen. But again, every country in NATO should have, to the best of their ability, to protect themselves. And I think that would make NATO stronger than having some reliance on capabilities of other countries in NATO to come to your aid, no matter what Article 5 says, So would love to hear any of your guys' opinions. If I said anything wrong, very likely I might have, or you disagree with, let me know in the comments. Would love nothing more. Hope everyone's doing well. And I hope I'll see you guys next time. We'll keep on learning together. Bye, guys.